In this talk about the 5 W's of continuous testing, we're going to focus on integrating testing throughout your pipelines with Mabel. But first, a little about myself. I'm Joe Lust, a cloud engineer here at Mabel, and I live and breathe testing, which has made it very apparent to me that there is a great need for continuous testing. And that's what we're going to take a deep dive into today. As we might have alluded to in the title, there are 5 W's and actually an H. We're going to talk about why you should be using continuous testing, what and where exactly you would use continuous testing, when you should be doing that testing, who is going to participate as an actor in that testing process, and finally drop into the nitty-gritty concrete details of how you can integrate Mabel in your CI/CD pipelines using our rich tool belt. First, the why. Why is continuous testing important for you? In short, we really want high velocity, high throughput pipelines for delivering code to production, for creating and deploying changes constantly. And as you're probably aware, there's an accelerating rate of innovation throughout the software industry where change is becoming faster than ever. And we have to find a way to take all those changes, for example, as shown here in this diagram, configuration changes or code changes or upgrades you need to make to your apps, or even the many APIs and dependencies that you pull into your applications, which could be in the thousands. We need to take all of those changes and rapidly convert them into user impact, user value by deploying them. The challenge, though, is CI/CD, or continuous integration and continuous delivery, is easier said than done. I wonder, on our session right now, is everybody comfortable with shipping all code changes to production automatically? Probably not. Why? What's missing from this picture? I think most folks in our session probably know what it is. I'm going to guess for you. That's right. It's quality. We need quality throughout our pipeline to ensure that we rapidly deliver high quality changes. You have to give me one moment. I just realized there's a battery issue. This will take 1 second. Oh boy. All right. There you go. I should have continuously tested that. Quality was missing from my setup here. Please pardon that interruption. As I said, we need quality in our pipelines to make sure that we can transfer all of these changes into user-facing changes without shipping defects quickly. Now, don't just take my opinion and Mabel's opinion here. Also consider what major research groups in the industry like Forrester have said in their reports, like the recent Forrester Wave report, where they identified that while we see software tools, engineering tools evolving rapidly to accelerate delivery, currently the tools for quality are not keeping up. The current state of quality testing and engineering is not able to cope with modern software development. We need a better way, and that's where continuous testing comes in. So what exactly does this look like, and where are we going to use it? Let's talk about continuous testing in detail and how we're going to integrate that watchful eye into our system so we can deliver with a high velocity. Typically, when we think of a software delivery pipeline, we think of something similar to this cartoon diagram here, where there are approximately 4 stages. We have the coding stage, where we're going to make changes that need to get shipped. The pull request or review stage, where we have to make sure that these changes are of a high quality. And then we need to deploy this code somewhere so it can be further evaluated and tested. Maybe it's your integration or your UAT or QA environments. And finally, we're going to need to send this code to run in its production environment. We'll take a deep dive into these 4 different stages and how you can integrate continuous testing in each using Mabel. So to start with, there's the coding phase where changes are made. And you have a little secret to share with you, a dirty little secret of engineers like myself. We might like to think that we're adding a lot of value, we're making features, but we are also the source of the majority of the bugs. We break a lot of things, though we don't mean to. So we need a better way to help engineers isolate these bugs early, early at the first stage in our pipeline, so they can't get any further. Two goals we generally have at Mabel when we integrate at this stage is how do we make sure that your code changes are working? And how do we have a rapid dev test loop? That is the time between when you can make a code change and then see that change reflected as quality or not. And the components that we offer in your tool belt here are mostly the Mabel CLI and the desktop app. Those are our core services. And if you want to get even more deeply integrated, tools like our Jest library and our GitHub application. And these are going to let us run headless tests and smoke tests and various means of finding those bugs very early. I'll touch real quick on the desktop app, the simple video here. Just give this one moment to load. And the key takeaway here is that in the desktop app, we can simply run a local test run. And all we did is just clicked one button here. And now we see this panel open and it's testing my blog website. It's actually doing a rich end-to-end test. It's actually using a Chrome browser running headlessly in the background. And I'll note that that's running in the background, so we're not interfering with your flow state. We're not getting in the middle of your workflow. You've probably seen this before with Selenium or some other tools where windows start popping up and closing all over your computer. You can't do much. But with tools like the Mabel desktop app, an engineer can easily run those tests and then get back into their flow state. And we saw there that that test ran in about, I think, 10 seconds. What I just did here is I checked another box that said run headlessly. And that's where I mentioned that we're not going to pop up anything in the way. And as we see, it only took 5 seconds to run. That is, we can even run faster in that headless mode. And the final thing I'm going to do right here is I'm going to show a neat feature, which is that we can put in localhost. We're overriding this test in the desktop app. And I'm going to start a server over here in the background. And now I'm testing my local code. I'm not even going out to a server. As an engineer now, I can make a change, run it locally, and see it. And here my test is going to run end-to-end locally, a few seconds, and now I'm really sure that everything works right. There we go, 9 seconds. And I have high confidence in that code change. Only 10 seconds to make sure my code is quality. It's much easier than some other tools. Let me just close this window. There we go. Now, oops, an important thing to note here is we want for the engineer to be in their flow state. We don't want to interrupt their context where they're most productive. So if that state for you, if that productive place is your integrated development environment, we have ways, I mentioned earlier, our Jest tests, and you can get all these green check marks to tell you if your code is working well, written as JavaScript unit tests. In this case, just hit a button, turns green, and now as the engineer who's sitting in her IDE, like IntelliJ here, there's no need to switch context. You automatically know if that change is quality or not using rich end-to-end headless tests. And finally, for the most brazen of individuals, maybe like myself, if you really love the command line, you can do all the same directly from the command line if that's where you're productive. And you get the same quick and rapid feedback. So that is the first stage where you're integrating continuous testing into your software delivery pipeline. The next stage is the pull request or the review stage. A coder has made a change, but we really need to be confident that it's high quality before we send it further down the pipeline. Now, we can bring more tools to bear. We can bring tools like headless testing, which we've already seen, but also more smoke tests, API tests, visual tests, cross-browser tests, or many different tests we can bring to bear here as we run these tests in the cloud and give us feedback directly into our review context to understand how good or bad is this change? Do we need to make a correction before it gets any further downstream? And that really sets us up for long-term success, because as we all know, the earlier we catch a bug, the closer we can shift it left to its source, the less time it takes to fix it. And the tools in your tool belt here again are the Mabel GitHub app. We'll touch on that in a moment. Our GitHub Actions, which if you use GitHub Actions with just a few lines of YAML, you can get these tests done automatically. And then our many other rich CI/CD integrations that work with most CI/CD vendors. So let me give you one example of how you can run end-to-end tests as a PR quality gate. So we can make sure that we don't merge buggy code. And here we can see this line down here. It says Mabel deployment tests. Simply by installing and configuring properly the Mabel GitHub app, you get this extra check placed into your pull request. And now if we clicked on this button for details, we'd see all the information if anything had been wrong. But luckily for this engineer, we see our changes are good. We have a green check mark. Everything turns green. This is ready to merge. And this is a great way to use those rich end-to-end tests and everything you've already built in Mabel automatically in your pull requests. So when you're making that decision, is this code something that we want to ship? You can have all that information at your fingertips. Okay, so we did that pull request and we decided we wanted to merge it. So now we're going to deploy it. When we deploy it, it's going to go somewhere for further testing. For example, it might be your UAT or your QA or your integration environment. The biggest thing we need to make sure we avoid is getting defects into production. And so that's why now we're going to bring the full power of your testing suite to bear for comprehensive end-to-end test coverage. We can do additional tests such as regression testing, cross-browser testing. Maybe you used Chrome in your local tests and Chrome in your pull review, but now we can use Chrome and Firefox, IE, Safari. We can use emulated mobile browsers. We can try every possible, confirmation of your application. We can also look at performance information. We can be more subjective, not just red or green. And we also can bring in API testing. Basically, we can throw the kitchen sink at this application change and make sure that we have a very high confidence and also a very broad, clear picture of the quality of the change. And how would you do this in your pipeline? It's the same tools as we saw before, our GitHub app, our many CI/CD integrations, and additionally, our Mabel CLI, which lets you, really use all the power of Mabel. So let's give you an example of what that might look like. In Mabel, if you're on the desktop app or the web UI, you've probably seen a deployment. And a deployment is a first-class entity that really collects all of the quality information about the change that you're considering moving to production. And it gives you a broad picture of quality so you can see all the rich insights that Mabel's collected and really make your decision if you want to promote this change. And here, for example, we can see on the UI that all of these plans were run. They were triggered because you told Mabel you made a deployment. And Mabel went and tested that new deployment wherever you deployed it. And we've got all the information about it. And as we'll see later, there are additional subjective measures that are brought to bear here as well to, again, give you that complete picture of the quality. Now, we can approach the final stage in your pipeline, which is getting that change to production so it has a user impact. Now, it might seem like that's the end of our journey, but quality, it doesn't end when you deploy to production. For example, maybe at 2 p.m. on a Friday, you ship code to production, but it still has to be quality code at 3 a.m. on Sunday. And that's where we really think the continuous testing moves into production as well. And for example, we can continuously run all of those rich tests that you created earlier, the regression tests, the cross-browser testing, and we can harness your QE investment to become a monitoring tool to continuously validate production so that we know that, again, that user workflow that was very important to your company, for example, being able to check out with a checkout cart or being able to, create a new user account, that still works every hour, every day. And the how you would do this in Mabel is very simple. You just use your scheduled plan runs. If you ever go in to create a plan run, you'll see that there's an option, a trigger you can use, and you can tell it to run, for example, every day at 2 a.m. or to just run every hour. And then you simply attach this to whatever your monitoring tool is. We have examples of this. If it's Victor Ops or Ops Genie, and now you have a very powerful monitoring tool, which, as I said, harnesses all the testing, end-to-end testing that you've already created. And just to reinforce that, you might ask again, when is it important to be using continuous testing? And that's where the answer is, we want to test continuously, basically all the time. The DevOps symbol you see here, it looks like an infinity symbol, and that's no coincidence. Quality, it never takes a break. So we need to test whatever defects could occur, which for many applications that are deployed in the wild, SaaS applications, that's anytime. Things could break at any time. So we, again, don't just want to test, we make a code change or do a build or release, but we want to test continuously. We want to monitor. And doing so is, again, very simple to do. Because luckily you're using Mabel. And once you've built all of these rich end-to-end tests, you can simply integrate with your pipelines, as I mentioned earlier, with these schedules and these different events, and you get that continuous testing at all of these stages of the pipeline. Now, you might ask, who is going to do all this? Who are the audience and the actors in our continuous testing play? And the answer is really simple. Everybody is a participant in quality with Mabel. We really see this as a way to democratize testing, that everybody in your organization can participate in quality. And it starts on the left here with our quality engineers, and they're going to craft our tests and maintain these tests. And they're also principally going to be reviewing all of the rich results, reports that come out of Mabel. But they're not the only people that can help. Our coders, the people like myself that, very happily contribute all the bugs. We also, as we saw earlier in the pull review stage, we can see all of the results in our pull requests of the tests and the quality that was created by the quality engineering group. We can see that in our pull requests. We can see that in our commits when we make a change. And a really important place we can see it is in the debugging ability of Mabel. We've heard from many a customer, and we've even done it ourselves here at Mabel as engineers, that an engineer gets a ticket. Someone's reported a bug as a ticket, and rather than try to go through the complex process of reproducing a bug and setting up their development environment and trying to get all their debuggers ready and try to find that bug, they don't need any of those things. They simply get the link from the Jira ticket for the bug, and they go and they look at the result of the failing test. And with the very rich information made available by Mabel, for example, the DOM snapshots of the complete HTML of the page, or all the network traffic in the HAR logs, or the complete Chrome trace, which shows you everything, like even processor level things happening in Chrome. You've got the screenshots, you've got the console logs from the browser with all of the information made available. It's literally as if, as an engineer or coder, I'm right there at that computer when the user experienced the issue. And you can actually just look at that and make the fix right there. Sorry, I talked at length about that, but I really think that's a really powerful place that coders can get to be a participant in quality just by using Mabel. Finally, I want to touch on a third group of people, business stakeholders. And disclaimer, the patterns I'm talking about here, quality engineers and coders and stakeholders, this is a way that we've seen this be done at Mabel and by some of our customers, but everybody does it differently. So this is just a suggestion. But the way we've seen business stakeholders integrate are that business analysts and product managers and other management groups, they can also see Mabel. They can just log in and they can easily see the results of tests. They can see the coverage reports, and they also become participants in our quality play. And even they can make simple no-code test updates. If for example, a string changed on a button, a label, you can go in, change that one thing, hit save in the Mabel UI, and now even a non-technical contributor has been able to help bring quality to bear. They've been empowered, and that actually frees our quality engineering group to focus on higher level subjective quality tasks. Rather than changing strings on buttons, they can actually focus on making even more complex tests or going and doing exploratory testing. The takeaway here, though, remember, is that everybody can contribute when you use a tool like Mabel and you got the continuous testing set up throughout your pipelines. So let me just give you an example of what that can look like. Here we have a preview, and I'm sorry, it's a spoiler for Lauren. She's in the next talk, of a release coverage report. And this is an example I wanted to bring up of getting that complete picture of quality. It's not just red, green. It's, for example, we have a percentage here. It's a continuous value. How well is my coverage of my user paths in this application? And as another example here from the release coverage, again, you can see that on the left, we have that binary state, right? Yes, no, passed, failed. But we also get a continuous curve here, right? We get these percentages. How well are things trending? And the takeaway I have here, as far as the actors and the who goes, is now anybody can come and see these reports in your organization and help make those decisions about what do we need to fix as engineers, or where do we have to shift our quality efforts. Everybody can see if that big release is ready or not. And it really is empowered all actors to contribute. And just to give you another example of how it also empowers folks, is it lets everybody see quality ubiquitously through tools like our notifications in Mabel. So it's something you really should turn on, so that the who of continuous testing is everybody. And in this case, I just stole something from some of my own testing apps. We can see that on my blog, some broken links were found. Wow, that's a bunch of them. I really need to go and take a look what's going on there. And this was sent to me in Slack automatically. These insights are dropped directly into, for me, my best workflow state in Slack. There are other ways to get these sort of notifications as well. For example, in email, if you turn on reports for a given workspace or given plan, you can get your rich email reports. In this case, it's showing me my demo workspace and how many tests passed and how many failed. Unfortunately, it looks like Flappy Test is a little flappy right now, so I need to take a look at that. But again, the takeaway is that with these sort of notifications, you can further bring everybody into the fold, so everybody can see what quality looks like in your application. So finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're kind of cheating. There's 5 W's and an H. The how. The how is the rich suite of tools we give you in the Mabel tool belt. And I'm just going to take a moment to kind of touch on each one of these, because if you're not using these, I really hope that you start. There are a lot of resources available, help.mabel and other places that'll get you set up in no time to really leverage these resources. So, on the left hand, we've got local testing. And we talked on this a little bit earlier, but the Mabel CLI is an amazing resource. If you want to integrate it any way you can conceive of, basically, you can hook up the Mabel CLI, whether you're an engineer typing in your laptop, or if you're putting it deep into your CI/CD workflows. We've seen many customers use Mabel in ways we never conceived of by using the CLI. Of course, the desktop app is an amazing tool. As we saw earlier when I showed you running headless, those tests, pointing them at a live app, pointing them at my local host server, all I had to do was make one click. If you ever used other tools, you have to install tons of components, get them all configured just right, get everything running just right, and then you can test. Here with the desktop app, everything is really Mabel easy, point and click. Definitely something you should be using if you're not already. The Jest integration, if you're somebody that likes to write unit tests for React or any Node.js or JavaScript applications, this again is a way that you can just run your tests as unit tests using Mabel's headless engine all in the background. It's basically all the CLI goodness right there in your unit tests. It's really an awesome toolkit. Getting into that CI/CD stage of the pipeline again, Jenkins, I'm sure everybody here's heard of Jenkins. Probably one of the most used CI/CD tools. They kind of invented CI/CD servers. Mabel has a first-class Jenkins integration. If you've got Jenkins, go to the Jenkins store, click install, and you've got the Mabel build step, and you can directly put it into any pipeline you want there. And this is going to let you trigger those tests and create those deployments we spoke of earlier, that nexus of quality where you're going to be able to see everything that happened about a deployment, track the coverage, all sorts of things like that. Just go into the Jenkins store, point and click. Azure DevOps, we've also got an integration there, a similar point and click, go and integrate Mabel into your Azure DevOps pipelines. Octopus deploy. Big shout out to one of our employees, Bertold. He loves Octopus deploy and brought this to bear. If you use Octopus deploy, piece of cake, you just incorporate that orb and you're off to the races. Bamboo, another popular enterprise tool. We've got a mechanism to connect in directly with Bamboo. Similar with Circle CI, all of these first-class entities. I'm just going to note down here the REST API for Mabel. If you feel really comfortable with making API calls, you can go straight to the source, from the horse's mouth, and you can call the Mabel REST API. If you just go into the Mabel app, actually, and you go settings and API, there's a rich tool in there that'll show you all the commands you need to use the REST API directly. Source control, we integrate with all of these, all the major players, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. And if you just go and search Mabel and any of these major brand names here, you'll see our first-class integrations with all of them. The richest of which is probably GitHub. We showed you here in the talk today, seeing those rich results directly on your commits, directly in your pull requests. So this is your tool belt. Most of these tools are point and click, so it's really easy to start dropping these pieces in. I know that CI/CD is bespoke, so nobody on this call has an identical setup, but with a strong set of tools in your tool belt, everybody should be able to easily integrate Mabel and get that continuous testing harnessed in their pipelines. So that, in a nutshell, is setting up continuous testing in your CI/CD pipelines at Mabel. Most of our customers, after not being customers too long, are asking us all the details of how to jump into this. I hope that you guys found this talk helpful. As always, you can find us on Friends of Mabel and ask us any questions you might have. You'll find me there as Joe. Feel free to email me as well if you've got any questions, Joe@Mabel, and you can tweet at me or follow me as well at LustCoder. And with that, I would love to take your questions about continuous testing in your CI/CD pipelines.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. That was great. We are opening up to questions right now. You can go ahead and use the QA panel in the event platform and go ahead and submit any questions that you do have. We do have a few already that have come in, so we can go ahead and get started, Joe. First one that came in is, do I have to be a Mabel admin to configure CI or integrations such as Circle CI?
Great question. So obviously you're going to have whatever permissions on your pipelines that your organization has set up, that your operations group has. With Mabel, most integrations use our API keys. You'll see those if you go into the settings and API panel. So I believe it's editors can see these keys, and if there is a key, you can use it. But in some cases, if you don't have any keys, an administrator in your Mabel account, one of people in your workspace would have to create that key. But again, it really depends on what your operational group is like and so forth.
Okay. Great. Another one that came in. Do you find a stakeholder sometimes need convincing to participate in testing? And kind of a follow-up to that, what if the stakeholder does not feel comfortable looking at the test? Like, how would you entice them to look at it?
Good question. I guess we've generally found that folks really like to be able to see see the brass tacks, show me the money. So I think that with Mabel, it's so simple to see this sort of information. Historically, I used things like many years ago Jenkins, and sure, if I took a stakeholder and told them to go look at 1 million lines of log output on a Jenkins UI, it's probably really daunting. It's not really user friendly to somebody that isn't a Jenkins maven. But I think with Mabel, when you can just give somebody a link and say, here's the output, you can see that test if that's what you want to see. Now, if you're a product manager and you're like, why are we allocating resources to fixing this bug? It becomes really simple for them to just click a link and see what's happening. So I don't really think there's a lot of trouble getting like stakeholders to look at this information. And I think that our additional high-level reporting, showing high-level values, not just red, green, but those percentages, those coverage reports, the performance reports, I think that also can help, managers and other stakeholders in their, budgeting and, resource allocation decisions. So I think that is oftentimes the kind of rich information those individuals like, to take, straight from the horse's mouth.
Wonderful. We have a few more coming in. Next one is, we are only testing pre-prod right now, but we want to expand where we're testing. What's the next best step for my team?
Sure, great question. So, we mentioned kind of 4 stages in that pipeline, right? We mentioned, the code changes, the pull request review stage, that deployment to pre-prod, and then production. We've found that when you can kind of, again, move left, shift left the discovery to that review stage or that local stage, it really is going to help you, flush out those bugs sooner. So, there are tools available now, for example, like preview environments or review apps. There's some words for it, but when you deploy some code, just to a simple environment, so you can test it at that earlier stage, that really helps folks. We do that here at Mabel. When you deploy something, a UI change, a little bot pops up in the pull request and says, go here to watch it. And, if you've ever had to go through and look at CSS changes and try to figure out what they mean, well, now you can just click a link and go and see it at an earlier stage than pre-prod. So, I'd really encourage folks to think about preview environments. We've actually given a number of talks in Mabel and have some documentation around that. But even before that, if that's too daunting, running locally is even easier. And that's where I think things like the desktop app lets you, go all the way left and shift as close to the source of the bug as possible. So preview environments and that local testing, I think, are a great thing to investigate.
Awesome. Next one up is, do you leverage Mabel capabilities for production monitoring?
That's a great question. Yes, it's a little secret that Mabel tests Mabel. We have many environments and, we run tons of tests against Mabel. So we're very confident in Mabel. I'm actually starting 10 minutes ago, a production on-call engineer. And so I know that there's a bunch of tests watching Mabel in production. And if anything doesn't look exactly right, I'll get paged. So, we use Mabel on Mabel in our monitoring, and we feel pretty confident about it.
Great. Another one that came in, how can I get access to the beta runner?
Great question. If you want to use, so we've got our CI/CD runner. We kind of mentioned that earlier there. I believe you can just reach out to your CSM. If you don't know who that is, you can also just kind of reach out to support. That little intercom pop-up in the desktop app or the web app, you can ask folks there. And I believe if you just Google for it, there is a sign-up form as well. So there are many ways that you can get access to start using that feature, which lets you run Mabel headless tests directly inside of your CI/CD pipelines.
Next question, how do SREs fit in?
Sure, SREs. So we mentioned, well, for folks that aren't familiar with that term, site reliability engineer, right? There are some folks who are really focused on keeping things up and looking great all the time for your SaaS applications. I think a great place for SREs is in part that continuous testing and production aspect. Now that you can kind of use Mabel as your monitoring tool, so an SRE can set up various tests to monitor for that performance and that coverage, and make sure that those real life end-to-end flows that a user sees continue to function correctly in prod. Because, if you do some really simple synthetic tests, oops, I'm getting into the details here. If you do some, simple synthetic tests, they might just make sure your website returns anything, right? But that's not going to tell you that the page is down showing 404. So that's where those rich end-to-end tests that make sure a user can get to your shopping cart, can open it, put an item in and check out, give you that confidence that everything is really working correctly. And that's the sort of confidence that an SRE is looking for.
Wonderful, wonderful. Looks like we have another one that just came through. I've seen this a lot throughout this conference. Right now, I am a senior QA wanting to change my role to QA. Is GitHub Access something that I would need?
Is GitHub Access something you would need to be able to install the GitHub app? I'm assuming is what you're referring to. That is something that generally like an administrator in your org would install. You can get to it from the Mabel settings integrations page and click setup, but that's just something that one person generally in your org would set up, and then you'd be able to see those rich results in the pull requests and to see them on the commits. But that generally would probably be what an administrator would set up one time, and then everybody in your org that has access to GitHub, to see pull requests should be able to use.
And it looks like there was kind of a clarification on
Sure.
that. Senior QA looking to move to a QE.
Excuse
Should
me.
I have access to GitHub?
Sure. I guess it kind of depends, if by access to GitHub, you mean be able to change code, it depends at what level you're kind of integrating Mabel. If you're just kind of using Mabel purely through the web interface, then you might not need GitHub access. If you want to start like directly making changes in your CI/CD flows, then you might need to, be able to make changes to the, the YAML configurations of your workflows. So it kind of depends what you might need to change. So again, it kind of comes down to what your org is using. But I guess I'd just make one clarification that once these tools are set up generally, then, as a quality engineer, you can still configure the tests that are going to run in those pipelines, and you don't really need to touch GitHub.